The Registrar of Faces. At 0226, the county records office printer spit out a ribbon of passport photos. The strip coiled on the floor like a wet label, warm for a breath and then cold, as if the heat had been borrowed. Each square showed the night clerk, but the faces were a fraction wrong, a smile that arrived before the eyes, pupils set too close, a blink split into two halves. When he lifted the ribbon, the printed eyes seemed to look up at him, waiting for the name they had not yet been given. That printer and the booth it belonged to now sit in a matte gray chamber at site number 17, catalogued as SCP-8257 and nicknamed the Witness Booth. The lens is bolted to a tripod and ringed with an LED that has no power cable. The booth can be locked in darkness and will still print an image, a person posed against a blank backdrop. When no subject is present, an image still arrives, and the face is always almost right. The paper smells faintly of salt and ozone, and the glass of the lens looks deeper than glass when you stare too long, as if a slow tide were moving behind it. Dr. Mirek kept his rules on a card that smelled of toner. Never speak your full name in the room. Never look at your own photo longer than 3 seconds. Never allow 2 people to be in frame. If the shutter clicks without a flash, leave. If you hear your voice when your mouth is closed, leave. The last line was underlined twice. It does not take pictures, it takes turns. SCP-8257 came from the town of Briar Cove, where the municipal building had a basement office labeled Reprints. After a fog rolled in and 36 people vanished from the ferry, the town discovered the booth would return those it had recorded. You had to bring a name and a photograph, and you had to sit while the lens studied you in silence. The missing returned within a day. The town reported them as found at sea to keep state investigators away and kept the office secret. The returns were close enough to pass at first glance. They laughed a beat late, smiled before the joke landed, and blinked as if their eyes were 2 different machines. Their faces grew too even, the soft asymmetry of age erased. In home videos, the light on their cheeks was always a fraction wrong, and in family photos, a pale hallway appeared behind them, lined with frames full of other faces. Parents noticed and said nothing. The mayor wrote names into a ledger tucked under the booth, a book of entries that grew more precise each week, as if the handwriting were being guided by a patient hand. When Foundation agents acquired the booth, they found the ledger wedged into the metal base. A sigil was inked on the inside cover, a loop crossed by 3 lines that never met at right angles. The town notes called it Keth, the Registrar, and described it as a clerk that catalogues the living. One margin read, "It remembers what it sees, and it adjusts what it forgets." There was no darkroom, no server, no file cabinet. The booth had no power, but worked anyway, the print paper warm in a room that never warmed. In containment, D9031 sat for a test with a blackout hood over his head. The shutter clicked in the dark. The print slid out, warm and damp, showing his face with skin pulled tight and a smile that did not touch his eyes. The printed face moved its mouth without breath and asked about his mother. He answered before he realized the rule, and in the next hour he could not remember the curve of her nose. The printed face sharpened in the same moment, pores appearing like stars in a thin sky. He said it felt like his own face was being tugged toward the paper, like a tide dragging at a shoreline. The more a subject spoke, the closer the likeness grew. Small scars softened, eye color evened out, the line of a jaw slid into a more perfect arc. The print's features became complex, as if etched by a careful hand that never lifted its pen. Several subjects reported a pressure behind their eyes, a sense that something was reading them from the inside out. In audio tests that were immediately halted by protocol, microphones recorded only a low chord, a vibration that did not move the air but stirred teeth and bone, matching the subject's voice frequencies in reverse. The manifestation came with a brief power loss at 0311. The ring light fired without electricity. The lens dilated too wide, a dark circle that deepened rather than opened. In that dim wash, the matte walls reflected a corridor that could not exist, ankled and long, lined with frames full of faces turned toward a single point beyond sight. The geometry slid, refused to settle. It felt like standing on the lip of a well and realizing the well was staring back. There was a rustle like thin pages turning, but the sound was in bone, not ear. Above the corridor, a sky of starless depth stirred, as if a vast room had its own weather. Dr. Mirek was inside when the door locked. The intercom hissed with a single instruction: state your full name. On the printout, his face waited with a perfect, patient smile. He refused, and the lock did not release. He could not look away from the photo for long, because it did not blink the same time he did. His own reflection in the observation glass answered him late. He spoke his name. The door clicked open. He walked out with a smile that held half-second too long. In his reports, he wrote that Keth is not in the booth, but in the ledger the booth reveals, a vast registry that extends through every mirror, every ID photo, every face seen by a lens. The booth is a hinge, a thin place where the registry can press through. A name is a filing key, a face is a draft. Keth does not hate or love. It keeps what fits its record. It does not kill. It edits. The last line of his report was small and careful. I am afraid of my own smile now, because I cannot tell if it is mine or a correction.